Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book, Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. Two, because I'm a fan of punk music. And three, it's just more fun, right? Anyway, if this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. And please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. Anyway, that's enough for me right now. Let's get into the interview. Before we do that, I'd like to say a big thank you to the folks at Pega for sponsoring my podcast for the coming month. If you don't know Pega, they are a low-code platform for AI-powered decisioning and workflow automation. Its scalable architecture helps the world's leading organizations work smarter, unify experiences, and adapt instantly, so they're always ready for what's next. They've also got their annual conference, Pega World Inspire, coming up, which will focus on how to address constantly shifting perspectives in an ever-evolving world, including guidance, strategies, and powerful tools to achieve resiliency in the face of rapid change. Now, the event will be held virtually on May the 24th from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, which will be for the Americas and European regions, and then again on May the 25th from 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time for the Asia Pacific region. The agenda and registration details can all be found at pegaworld.com. Do check it out, and I hope to see you there. Now, let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Don Schuerman, who is the CTO and VP of Product Strategy at Pega. Hey, Don, how are you doing? And welcome back, I should say.
Great to be here, as always.
Excellent. Now, as I said, welcome back, and thank you for speaking to me today. And also, I should say, right up front, thank you for sponsoring the podcast this month in the run-up to Pega World Inspire that's going to take place on the 24th and 25th of May, over the course of like 2.5 kind of hours. It's like different time zones and things, but you can go to pega.com to find out kind of more. So first of all, I just want to say that just so people know. So just big thank you for that. But also as a friend of the podcast, I mean, I counted it up actually, and I was like, wow, you've been on the podcast 3 times before, started back in 2017. I was like, wow, blimey. So, but given that we might have some new listeners, hopefully we always get some new people. And before we get into it, I wanted to ask you just to give us a bit of a thumbnail sketch on Don and Pega and kind of what's in your world. What, you know, give us a picture of you.
Yeah, so so I'm CTO and Vice President of Product Strategy at Pega, which has kind of basically turned out to be the dream job for me, because I get to spend a lot of time with our clients, and I get to spend a lot of time with our technology. And to me, those are the intersection of the technology and what the technology can actually do for our clients and their customers is, to me, where the fun is at and where the excitement's at. And Pega's technology is really focused on providing a low-code platform that can make AI-powered decisions and automate workflows, right? So automate processes.
Yeah.
And our clients use that to transform the experiences of their customers, the experiences of their employees, everything from how they engage their customers on the front end to how they acquire and onboard them. There are lots of processes involved with bringing a new customer on board, especially in regulated industries, how they deliver service to their customers, really streamlining that, making it easier for both the agent and the customer to get the service they want, how they run some of the operational processes that underlie and support that, and then how they fix stuff when things go wrong, how they handle those exceptions to the processes. So
Awesome.
you look across our customer base, you see them, innovating new ways to improve the experiences in those areas.
Nice. So like I mentioned, that this podcast is to try and promo and give a big shout out to the Pega World Inspire that's happening later in May. And what I wanted to do is just to ask you, like, what can we expect at Pega World this year, and like who's going to be talking, and what are the kind of the big themes? So give us the kind of the movie trailer.
Yeah, well, so the movie trailer is this is a virtual Pega World again.
Are you going to be jumping around in that silver jacket again?
Maybe we'll see. We'll see. I am, and I think like a lot of us are, ready to be back to sort of in-person events. I think given some of the motion of where things have been moving, we thought virtual made sense for one more year. We want to keep people's time, focused, right? We realize in a virtual event, you got to keep it tight. So it's about a 2.5 hour event. We're running it twice, so that depending on your time zone in the world, it's going to be the same great content. You can see it live in 2 different time zones. Mm-hmm. And the big things that we're going to be, talking about across Pega World is a lot of people have said, and I think it's almost become a cliche at this point, that we've been through about 10 years of transformation. Mm-hmm. On the employee experience side, the technology side, the customer experience side in the past 2 years. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about is how do we maintain that momentum? Right? I don't think that pace of change is going to slow down. I think it's just going to accelerate. And the leaders in business are going to have to keep the gasoline of change, or the pedal floored, in order to keep up with what customers want, to keep up with what employees want, especially as we go through this great resignation period where there's a lot of freedom and demand, I think, across people to switch jobs, find new careers. So you've got to be delivering on an employee experience, mm-hmm. and you need the great employee experience to deliver your great customer experience. Mm-hmm. So, so we're talking about how you do that. And, we're a software company. So how do you use technology in a focused and repeatable, but also innovative way in order to deliver that?
Awesome. And so I'm going to put you on the spot now, because I want to know that which talk are you most looking forward to and why?
So there's a
you can't say your own, by the way.
All right. Well, there's a keynote. There are a couple of keynotes that I'm really looking forward to. Okay. I'm really looking forward to hearing from T-Mobile. Mm-hmm. T-Mobile is a large, U.S. wireless carrier. Mm-hmm. And, I think a great brand really focused on the experience of their clients or customers. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be talking about how they have used that AI-powered decisioning capability that I mentioned, right, to get incredibly personalized and relevant every time they have a conversation with their customer.
I think that's going to be really interesting, because this is going to be post John Legere, kind of like in his tenure. So he took them to a place and established a positioning and some momentum and a way of doing things, which was like, we're going to break everything and we're going to figure out kind of what's the best way to do it. And so this is, I guess, the post Legere kind of like era, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, and he definitely sort of established, you want to talk about sort of a punk brand or a punk ethos, right? I think he definitely...
He drops the mics on that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think he definitely established that, right? And this is about now, how do you maintain that kind of personalized relationship, mm-hmm. but at a massive scale with millions of customers, and ensure that every conversation, every interaction is personalized and relevant. So you're not spamming people with, irrelevant, promotional stuff, mm-hmm. but you're actually having conversations that are meaningful to each individual customer. So I'm really excited. I'm really excited to hear about that. And I think that brings together really deep thinking about what does the customer experience need to look like, and then how do we employ technology to do it at the kind of scale of one of the largest wireless carriers in the U.S.
Awesome. I mean, I think that's going to be super interesting, given that where John and Jerry kind of like where he established them, and now kind of how do they maintain that and sort of stuff. So that's, and how do they kind of, if you like, push on with his, I guess, his legacy. So that's kind of like the first one. What you mentioned two? What's the second one?
So the other one is a company called Booking.com, which is a European kind of travel agency.
Yeah.
And they've deployed and are talking about how they're using technology, especially in terms of automation, right, to improve the customer experience and service experience. And so much of, I think, breaks in the service experience are really breaks in workflows, breaks in process, right? You call in and I can't answer your question right away because I actually have to route it to somebody in the back office or some other department in order to get that work done. Well, that's a workflow problem, fundamentally. So, they're talking about how do we streamline the workflow experiences inside of our service and connect up all those pieces so that when a customer or a partner or somebody calls in with a question or a need, they can resolve it right away rather than, forcing, because nobody wants to wait for this stuff to get fixed. And the way you eliminate that wait for the customer, the way you drive efficiency into the servicing operation is ultimately you automate and improve the workflows.
I use Booking.com quite a lot, and I know them. They're headquartered out of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And I remember kind of hearing about them via Stefan Tomke in his book, kind of as experimentation works. He's a professor across at Harvard. He did a big case study on them about how they're an experimentation kind of led organization. And so they did that on the front end to try and kind of build engagement with their customers. And I guess, are they doing that also? Is that going to give a preview? Are they taking the same sort of approach in the back end, or are we going to have to wait and see
inside of the servicing experience, right? So like once I'm engaged, but I need help. I mean, things go wrong when you travel, right? So how do I make that experience seamless and easy and fast for the customer, and also for the agents and employees that are supporting them?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'll be really looking forward to that as well, because I think they are one of those standout brands that are just kind of leading the way. They are a monster and doing really, really well. But I also know that you're going to be talking. So what are you going to be talking about? Because you're like in the thick of it, right? You're seeing all the different stuff and you're playing around with the technology and talking to clients and thinking about all these different sort of things. So what are you going to be talking about?
So, one of the things that I'm going to be talking a little bit about is this almost, sometimes it feels like loss of focus, right? So, there's been a lot written, I think there's been people have talked about sort of the vibe shift, right, that has happened. And in trying to diagnose this, like why do things just feel so different and sometimes feel, a little bit uneasy with all that's going on in the world? And one of the things that I think that has happened is we've lost the ability to focus. This virtual world is kind of, you're always on, you're always multitasking a little bit. When you're looking at somebody on a Zoom screen, you're still sort of always like seeing your alerts from the email system and the messaging system and the other messaging system. And so you're never like 100% focused. We have, it's great that I don't have to pay massive fee to a cable company for hundreds of channels I don't watch. I now just need to figure out like what of the 100 or so streaming services that are out there I want to like figure out which show do I want to pay for to watch this month. And like all of this stuff just becomes, it feels sometimes almost more complicated, right? And because of that, there's just this loss of focus. So the question becomes, what do we need to do to address that, right? And I'm not gonna solve this as a psychological need, and I don't think necessarily Pega as a software company is gonna solve this problem that I think is broader in society. But I think what we can do is figure out, so from an IT perspective, what does that mean?
Right.
from an IT perspective, as we're struggling with lots of different systems and we're struggling to bring legacy forward into the cloud, and we're thinking about what are the skills that an IT organization needs to develop to keep up with this momentum of change and help create some places of focus inside an organization, so that it's not the complexity of the systems that you're dealing with, but the focus of the experience that you want the customer to have. How do you do that? What technology do you need? What skills do you need? And I think I think there's this shift happening in IT, where it's not just hard tech anymore. It's got to be human. It's got to be empathetic. You've got to have people who are collaborators with the business leaders, and business leaders and innovators themselves, not just programmers and doers and prioritizers of the requests that are coming in, right? And I think that we're going to talk about sort of that shift that needs to happen in IT.
And so is this like emergent sort of like thinking, or is it also being informed by things that you've seen out in the field, as it were? And if so, do you have examples that you can share about kind of like what some people are doing to try and combat some of these, like drop in focus, the complexity, kind of all of these different sort of things, and how tech can kind of like help, just to kind of like to give us a clue about kind of where the direction of travel, as it were?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. One, we've done some broader survey work on sort of what we call the future of IT. Right? So we've been asking IT leaders about what skills that they're going to see, necessary in the future, and what are their priorities into the future, right? So one of the interesting things that we kind of seeing is that the sort of promotion again of these people skills, these soft skills, becoming really prominent. The sense that, there's the technology stuff. Yes, I need it and it's there, but I also need people who are communicators, who can listen and understand and then coach a business person. And what we're seeing even in our clients, as low code technology becomes more and more prominent, right? I'm seeing IT organizations try to figure out how they can lean into that. Right? So that low code doesn't become rogue IT. It doesn't become this pocket of alternative. It rather becomes something that IT is providing to the business to be sort of a garden of innovation. But how does IT shift their perspective to, look, we've now got to become coaches for these business people. We've got to help them understand how to use this technology in a way that is sustainable, that is still going to be secure and scalable, and isn't going to lead to hundreds of apps that IT now has to go replace in 5 years, right? Because we've been through that rodeo before. And so I think that shift, and I've seen that in a number of our clients, is really interesting, and it's a shift in the role and the skill set of what IT needs to do.
And is that kind of like similar to the shift that we've seen in things like kind of HR, where HR can move from being a function to people start talking about HR partners and stuff, he says, doing air quotes and kind of like on an audio recording. I mean, is that a similar sort of shift where, and it's almost like a positioning, and then the positioning there requires different sort of like skill sets and mindsets in order to make sure that you're focusing on the right things and you're kind of operating the right way to add value to the overall kind of business, rather than you say just being a doer.
Exactly. That's exactly it, right? This idea of, we've been talking about this role of a low code coach, right? So if I'm going to have my business people start engaging with low code software to do some of the application development on their own, right? Well, now my role as an IT expert is shifting from, like, I'm the offensive line or the offensive side that the business passes the ball to, and I go do it, to no, I need to be the coach.
Right.
I need to be the person who's sharing my experience with the business and giving them direction and guidance and the proper places on the field to go, but actually allowing them to go take the ball and do what they need to do. And I think that's a different perspective and a different mindset that we haven't had necessarily at that level before.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it sort of smacks of all sorts of different sort of and similar sort of like challenges around that organizations have faced kind of before in different eras and different kind of like with the different functions. So that makes sense. So I'm really kind of looking forward to that. But so that's given us a bit of a synopsis of kind of Pega world. You're going to be talking about changing role of kind of IT and this low code coach, which is kind of fascinating. Then we're talking about sort of T-Mobile and telling us and them telling us kind of like what they're doing to kind of create this kind of like, and how they're using decisioning to kind of create this kind of super hyper personalized sort of experience. And then booking.com and how they kind of connect up all the different things. So the internal experience kind of matches kind of the external sort of experience. So that's like, I mean, and they're two big leaders in this space, and there's like a plethora of other kind of people that's kind of packed into this 2.5 hours, as well as demos and all that sort of stuff. So hopefully we're giving people enough of a bit of a teaser, kind of like to go and see it, and like go to pega.com and check it all out and register, and 2.5 hours well spent, I guess. But is there anything that I haven't covered that you want to kind of like highlight that we've missed out?
I mean, the only thing I would say is, we're a technology company, right? So, and I like to think we're a pretty innovative one. So it wouldn't be a Pega world without some cool product announcements and product stuff to talk about, right? So I think you're going to hear, and both in the run up and at Pega world, about some new things that we've done and kind of tied to what we've been talking about, some new technology and other capabilities we're bringing forward to support this low code deployment and this idea of coaches and business and IT collaboration. Some new both technologies, but also new training and some services to support that. The example of using your workflows to improve your service. We are announcing, I think, some new capabilities of how do you take these workflows and embed them everywhere in your client experience, because that's how you actually get to better self-service and more automated self-service, so faster experiences. And then I think the thing that I'm really excited about is it's sort of at that intersection of AI decisioning and workflow automation, which is how do I start to use technologies like process mining, like going in and understanding at a big level the data of how work is actually getting done, not just so I can draw a picture of my business process, but so I can actually optimize in real time the process that's going on. So, this idea of continuously making these processes more efficient, more effective, eliminating the complexity in those places where you go off the rails. So there's going to be, I think, some pretty exciting announcements that exist sort of at this intersection of what has traditionally been thought of as process mining and where Pega has historically played in the sort of process automation or workflow automation space. And it's going to build on some of the stuff we announced last year around process AI. So how using AI to optimize the workflows.
Awesome. That's super cool. A fun-packed or interest-packed 2.5 hours. But I wanted to also kind of like ask you kind of, Dom, because it's always fascinating to get your perspective, because I know that, as you say, you're heavily involved in the technology and heavily involved in clients, and you think about where things are going kind of a lot. And I wanted to step back a little bit, and so I've been talking about how we're emerging from what I'm going to call, again in air quotes for an audio recording, the pandemic years, it feels like. And maybe that'll kind of catch on. But I just wanted to ask you, like, so what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned, and how are those things going to inform how you do things kind of going forward?
I think so. This sort of transition from like the before times to the during times to the after times, right? And we can argue how much of the during and the after, where we sort of are in that transition. But I think we're beginning to see like the after a little bit, although the world at large seems to be throwing up new challenges and new interesting disruption, right? And let's hope as a planet and a society we can figure out how to tamp those down as well. But the things that I think have come out is, one, I think businesses have learned and seen how much agility and innovation is possible when you almost have no choice but to innovate. You know, the speed at which I've seen organizations be able, in some cases, to shift their employee experiences, right? You know, to shift their customer experiences, both through really hard work and really great thinking, and also the appropriate use of technology. And I hope we keep that mindset in mind, right? You know, I think if you had asked a lot of executives 3 years ago, you know, could you run your business with a totally remote workforce? You know, they would say no. Like, you know, there's, right? Like, well, yeah, we can, right? And what I hope we take from that is this continual sort of, well, maybe we need to be continually testing our assumptions. You know, maybe the things that we think aren't possible are a little more possible than we had thought. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to think about what this future work world looks like, because I don't think we're going back to a full-time, you know, everybody in the office 9 to 5, at least in a lot of the industries that are more, you know, technology driven, service driven kind of worlds. But I also don't think I don't think we figured out, right, how to go back to the office yet. I think, you know, people are finding themselves that they go back to the office, they have this wonderful reconnection where they see people and it, you know, we hang out and you go, oh my gosh, it's so great to just have coffee with people and have these little side. And then we go into our cubicles and get back on Zoom calls with people who are not in the office. Yeah. Right? And I think we just have to figure that out, because we've got to figure out how we balance that experience. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that transition happens. I think it's going to be interesting to see if we can keep the pace of innovation. And I think the other thing that, you know, at least I've learned from the pandemic, is that when you don't have that kind of just natural, hey, I'm going to see you in the kitchen area and we'll have coffee, right? You have to put conscious effort towards the human connection, right? And I hope we keep some of that conscious effort in place, conscious efforts around, you know, listening to people and thinking about the diversity of viewpoints that you're getting in a conversation. And I want to see us keep that and accelerate that as we move into the after time periods. Yeah, I mean, it strikes me that what is it? Something is what is it? Is it something? There's an old saying that says something like kind of constraints are the mother of all invention or something. Yeah. And it also reminds me of a story that of the and I forget the author's name, but the author of the Dr. Seuss books that kind of many adults and a lot of children kind of love. Yeah. And the author had a bet with his publisher one time that he could write a book in 50 words, using 50 words or less. And he did. Yeah. And that book sold like 20 million copies. Right. And it was this idea that if you apply constraints, sometimes you end up having to, you force people to be creative, yes, as it were. And maybe that's the thing that we need to kind of learn, is that we learn is actually our agility and innovation and creativity has come about because of the constraints that have been applied to us. And maybe we need to think about how do we apply real constraints to, yes, ourselves, if that's the thing that needs to force us on.
to that, and helps us examine our assumptions and things, and forces us to do sort of things, because I think otherwise we might end up we snap back to where we were.
And I think what you just said is very much tied to constraint is a way of providing focus.
Yeah.
Constraint is a way of cutting out some of the noise and the complexity, right? And creating a smaller problem out of a bigger problem, right? I was just reading this this article about a woman who just has this approach to sort of, keeping your space clean, right? And I think people kind of, especially if you're home for a while in the pandemic, could kind of get overwhelmed by some of this. And her point was that, and I love this, right, that in any room there's only 5 things. There's trash, dishes, laundry, things that have a place where they should be, and things that don't have a place where they should be. And if you can just focus your exercise and say, look, I don't need to clean this whole space, but I'm just going to go get all the trash. And then I'm just going to go get all the dishes. And then I'm just going to go gather up all the laundry, right? And all of a sudden you end up with a clean, space, but you get that by creating this focus and narrowing the problem down by putting some constraint around it. And I think that's just a great way to approach, I think, any problem.
Absolutely. So, but on that, if you flip that sort of in terms of from lessons, in terms of, are the things that you kind of identified? I mean, do you think those are the key challenges lie ahead, or is there more coming down the track that we need to be aware of, do you think?
So I guess I would argue that there's more coming down the track that we aren't aware of.
Okay.
I think the other thing that we need to have learned from the pandemic is there will be big shifts that happen that we don't predict.
Yeah.
And sometimes rather than trying to always predict what's next, how are we building the resiliency and the agility into our business and into our technology so that we're building something that is designed to respond to what's next, even when we don't always know what next is, right? And that, Pega's tagline is build for change. And sort of baked into that is this idea that the thing you need to architect your business and your technologies for is change. Knowing full well that you don't necessarily always know what that change is going to be. But if you build for change, you're anticipating whatever might be coming.
I think that's interesting. But also the other thing is that I think going forward, people are going to have to just kind of transfer the stuff that's been forced upon them, as it were, into how do I create this habit, right, of doing kind of things, and whether that, and how that's supported by systems and processes and culture and things, because it really is a habit. The resilience is yes, it's an attribute, but it's developed through habits, the development of habits. And so, and I think it's a really good point, because otherwise you kind of, the idea that build for change, that can all feel slightly anomalous, not at all anomalous, amorphous sort of thing. It's like, it's like, what does that mean?
Right. But and I think part of it is taking on that habit and that mentality of, I can't necessarily control everything that's coming, right? But I can control what I do now. Right, I can build the sort of focus or the constraints into what I do now, and I can focus on designing something that will allow me to change and allow me to respond. Right, that I'm not like locking myself into one direction permanently, because there's a good chance I'm going to have to change that direction at a certain point.
Yeah. So, John, if I was to kind of ask you to boil it all down and say, because there's a lot of different things that we talked about, but I also ask you to boil it all down and say, Don says, do this. Kind of, what would it be?
Well, yeah, I think to your point of the idea of constraint or the idea of focus, one of the things that we've found has been very effective is to attack some of these customer experience and employee experience problems one micro journey at a time.
Yeah.
Right. And I think thinking about the customer journey at large is an important exercise, but it sometimes can be overwhelming. Right. It's like looking at the messy room in your house and being like, okay, I've taken it all in and I have a vision of what this clean room might look like, but how the heck do I get there?
Sure.
Right. And the micro journey is about breaking it down and saying, well, you know what? I'm going to start with when my customer calls in to change their address. And I'm going to make that easy, right? I'm going to start with, getting rid of the trash, right? Or whatever the case may be. But that micro journey approach of, can I break this broader customer journey down into manageable chunks? What are the things that my customers come to me to do, or my employees try to do? And you can identify a micro journey because there's generally a meaningful outcome at the other end of it, right? Like an onboarding micro journey. Well, at the end of an onboarding micro journey, I've got a new customer and a customer's got a new product that they can use. At the end of a servicing micro journey, my customer started with a request and need, and I met it at the end of that servicing micro journey. And if I can break my experience down, right, that gives me then a way to actually approach it. And I can do that one at a time, and I can make meaningful deliverables and meaningful change in my experience. But I also am doing it in a way that lets me move fast and learn and take the learnings from my first micro journey. Okay, I got my address change fixed. Now I'm going to fix what happens when my customer is disputing a charge on their bill. A little trickier, but now I've learned and I can go. And we found that approach to be really effective.
Awesome. I like it. Yeah, break it down. Reminds me of another saying was that it's a Confucian saying which says the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step, and you've just got to figure out kind of what the steps are and keep stepping.
Yep, exactly. Perfect. Right.
So that's brilliant. And before we can we kind of wrap up, I just wanted to, as I always do, sort of append these interviews with a couple of kind of left field kind of questions around linked to this whole punk CX things. Now you're familiar with this, but then there's a new one added on. But I wanted to kind of revisit the sort of what one or two words you might use to describe a punk approach to CX, and see if you can kind of come up with something kind of new and different. So what would you pick this time around?
Oh boy! And now I got to remember what I've said in the past. But if you're going to ask me like one or two words to describe a punk CX approach, I would say stripped down. Right. Like punk to me is about getting at the essence of the thing. Right. Not with unnecessary embellishments. Right. Like, and I maybe this again, which I think fits with the idea of constraint and focus that we were talking about. What's the essential? What's the thing the customer's trying to do? Yeah. What's the thing the employee's trying to do? And how do I clean out that path to make it as easy and direct as possible?
Awesome. That's very cool. And then the follow-on one, which links to the new book, then the follow-up book to Punk CX was Punk XL, because it's based on this idea that there's been so many changes over the last kind of 2-3 years, and so many things have sort of like moved up the agenda. We've seen all kind of everything's all connected, and it's no longer sufficient just to talk about customer experience in isolation. And I think we need to take more of a holistic approach. That's what the book was suggesting. Yeah. It was also suggesting that in that sort of within that idea is that we talk about, brand leadership or market leadership or technological leadership and things. And my idea, my question was, is it not time for us to start talking about experience leadership, hence the XL? And so I wanted to ask you, kind of, what company or brand do you think is like an experience leader, and why?
So this is actually a pre-pandemic example.
Okay.
But the company that I'm going to pick is called REI, which is Recreational Equipment Company Incorporated.
I love REI.
So
they've been smashing it for years.
Right. So they're a sporting goods. They're actually a cooperative, right? So you shop there, you're a member, and you get a dividend back. And they have great stores, very experiential, where you can like try on the boots, and then they have little steps you can test them, right? And the people who work there are all, you can tell that everybody who works there like loves being outdoors, and they bring that kind of passion.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought one of the sort of more punk XL moves in a brand ever was when REI was very, very public about the fact that they were going to shut down their stores on Black Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Black Friday, the big shopping day after Thanksgiving, everybody lines up, and REI said, nope,
mm-hmm.
You should be outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
We're an outdoor company. We want our employees to be outdoors on Black Friday. We want our customers to be outdoors on Black Friday. So we're shutting down the company on that day. And to me, that was an example of taking what the brand stood for and then putting it directly into the employee experience, putting it directly into the customer experience. And it was it paid off in both ways. It was a great brand message for the company, right? But it also, really said that the company was going to stand by its values for its employees and for its customers. And I've always kind of respected that about that company.
Yeah, no, I love that move as well. But I guess I was speaking to somebody else on the podcast a little while ago, and I was talking about REI, and I was telling them it's like they've just been making moves for like years. I remember when the first kind of wave of e-commerce, sort of like early 2000s, and where everybody was trying to kind of figure out whether it's kind of like bricks and mortar and then e-commerce, and people were doing things separately, and they were a little bit like, why don't we not just smash them all together? Like going, why don't you have an e-commerce site that talks to our shops and understands the inventory that they have, and we don't need another warehouse. And so when orders come in, we can find out where they are in the retail network, and we get that shop to kind of fulfill that order and send it directly to the kind of customer. And they were like they're like a decade in front of kind of other kind of people.
Yeah, and they've kind of had for a long time that ability of when you go shop online, you can order it, or they could also say like, hey, this is at a store that's 12 miles away. So if you want to go drive and get it, go get it.
Yeah. So they've been so in front of kind of people in terms of their thinking and their technology. Like, why would we want to do that and that? Why can't we just do that? And right from the get-go. And I just thought, yeah, no, they're brilliant. They're this, not a big flashy brand, but they're definitely a brand that's worth kind of paying attention to. So thank you for giving them a big shout out, because I think they are definitely one to watch and learn from. So Don, that's all I have today. So first of all, I want to say thank you once again to Pega for sponsoring the podcast this kind of month. And people should check out the Pega World Inspire at pega.com, which is going on that May the 24th and 25th in 2 different time zones. Regardless of where you are in the world, you'll be able to watch a live show. And then say to thank you for you, one, for all the work you do, and also for sharing your time and your perspective kind of with us. That's been super cool.
Well, this is always a pleasure. I look forward to our conversations a lot. So thank you for having me as a guest, and your gracious hosting so many times. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And I look forward to even more to the time, hopefully next year, kind of when other things being remaining stable, that we can get together kind of and share a beer.
I think a lot of us are looking forward to that. And I definitely look forward to doing that with you, Adrian. So thank you.
Well, that was cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, and I always do actually, because I always learn something new when I speak to some of these amazing kind of people. And it's always something new that I can incorporate into my writing, speaking, workshops, and other sort of advisory work that I do. Now, if you're interested in learning about any of that sort of stuff, then you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinscoe.com. But one final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again soon. All the very best. Cheers. Bye.